WEFM, the universe sound.
Flow can make the season even merrier. Switch to a Flow prepaid combo plan and we'll give you a 30-day plan absolutely free. That's a whole month on us. 36 gigabytes of data, unlimited calls and texts, plus all the social media and WhatsApp you need to share every festive moment. Plus, spin the wheel for even more prizes. Switch to Flow prepaid today and get your next combo on the house. Sign up in-store today or visit online at discoverflow.co. We keep your Christmas rhythm flowing.
WhatsApp us or call us at 457-9997. Activated Mornings on WEFM 99.9 is on now.
And the time right now, it is 8:46, and we are back with you with another segment of our Activated Mornings program. In studio, it is Rajiv, and in the virtual studio, we have Dr. Gerald Thompson. All right. Remember that this is the Flow Activated Mornings program here on WEFM. So, Doc, over to you for your commentary. Oh no, that's me. That's me. Okay. Let's go. Morning, Doc.
Yes. But when things start to go wrong, they go wrong. And my commentary, I can't seem to pull it up in time. You know what I mean? But, these things happen. But I wanted to make a correction because in the last segment, I responded by saying that after the Trump administration, Maka had said that they are having cooperation, I would have commented to say that she had responded to say, no, that's not the case. Well, a subsequent release has indicated that she now has a more conciliatory approach. And that, but they're talking about the Venezuelans' sovereignty, respect for sovereignty, respect for their own fundamental rights in terms of ownership and so forth and things of this nature. And it's still somewhat different. And I wanted to read out those particular elements because they would seem somewhat different to that of what, still different from what the Trump administration say. Look, we are going to sell the oil. You know what I mean? We are basically going to take over and run the country. Now, but the conciliatory approach is calling for cooperation in development, because it is true that the oil rigs and the various oil facilities were constructed predominantly with US technology, and the lack of parts, the lack of access to people who could service these particular things, even though the Venezuelans have been doing it themselves, not having a part, your car goes down and you can't find a part, your car is down, And so it's similar with some of these oil facilities and so forth. They constantly need repair and that of upgrade and replacement. And if you can't get those replacement parts, then your ability to mine the oil, extract the oil, becomes diminished. But I certainly believe that the United States will want to cooperate. Clearly, some measure of the sanctions will be reduced, but it's a matter to what extent is it that the United States is able to say, we're taking over, we're going to run the country now. You essentially will do as we say. You do as we say, but in terms of we are actually running the country. And I think that is really, fundamental. Now, across the region, the response has been quite, I would say, sober, persons not necessarily wanting to build up the wrath of the United States. And so before you said you wanted to ask something in relation to CARICOM. I think that, like you see, a statement by our foreign minister, Bramble, and so forth, was, I think, an expected response, indicating that we have good relationships with Venezuela, we have good relationship with the United States, but we have lots of interests with the United States in terms of remittances and so forth, and one doesn't want to upset those particular issues. So I think across the region, you're going to get this. And I've listened to Mia Motley, listened to several other entities, and it's going to be interesting to see what is a collective response over the next few days, because the fundamental elephant in the room and question to be asked is that, can this be done to any other country in the Caribbean? If there is someone who criticizes the United States or doesn't vote in favor of this or that at the UN when they're being asked to do so, then what happens to your economy? What happens to your visa, ability to obtain visas? What happens to trade? What happens to tariffs? What happens to all these other things? So certainly diplomatic relationship, some people would consider, can be weaponized. And it's going to be important to see how the countries respond. By the same time, it's going to be important to see how Venezuela itself is responding. And my impression is that on the ground, even though with the loss of their president, Maduro, and celebrations in Doral, Florida, that the folks in Venezuela are not necessarily keen on the United States coming and taking over their country and running the country.
Okay. All righty. Thank you there, Doc. All right. So what was on my mind? It's in relation to that same point that Doc is making in terms of the responses from countries or leaders of countries. And we have seen that a lot of the responses have been mild, in a sense where they haven't made any statement, let's say, against U.S. actions, condemning them for what they've done, etc. In your opinions, do you find, both the statement by CARICOM and statement by individual leaders to be weak? Do you see the leaders as being weak for not taking a stance in terms of their thoughts on this? Because, and I'm raising it because I saw a friend post, she had a post last night and she said something to the effect that, that statement by the Minister of Foreign Affairs was poor. And by extension, the statement by CARICOM. And she said, don't tell me nothing about we too small to have a voice, right? So it had me, so I first chuckled because, my usual thing, I will chuckle first at something. And I'm there like, what exactly are persons expecting the leaders, especially for us as small island developing states? What are they expecting us to do or to say?
The funny thing about it is I was watching C.R. Marshall's program last night on YouTube. And he spoke about the response as well. And he said that, it was... I guess he was looking for a straight condemnation of the action by...
He is expecting our Minister of Foreign Affairs or our Prime Minister?
Well, because he also noted that CARICOM had a meeting on the issue and St. Vincent was not represented at the meeting according to him. But I remember back when Ukraine, this situation with Ukraine had just happened and people were looking for then Prime Minister Dr. Gonzalez to say, hey...
to condemn Russia, say what he did is wrong.
He had said something, but he didn't straight out condemn him either. So, we're friends of, he said, always say we're friends of all and enemies of none here. He would make an appeal to Putin. And so in the same case, I don't think this is anything far from our recent foreign policy. This is
You see, I'm never one to say that just because you're small, you should roll over and play dead, right? I will never subscribe to that. But when it is that I hear of persons wanting for leaders and I'm just looking at it within the Caribbean, right? Knowing so much how much we depend on the US for various things in different aspects, whether it's tourism, whether it's remittance, whether it's for products, for services, etc. We depend on the US. And do we even collectively, do we have the might, do we have the power to say, we are going to condemn you for what you have done? Would anybody really and truly, even with a collective voice, want to call Trump out? And this is why when I think about it, and I'm saying for us as a people, when we place so much demands or so much expectations on our leaders, then when they don't do what we think that they're supposed to do, we think or we consider them as being weak.
Yeah. I guess in this case, too, when there's like a blatant violation of the law, a lot of people think it's like a clear-cut black and white kind of thing. Hey, you break the law, you're wrong. Call you out. It's like any other law. If you break, if I break into a compound and I take belongings from there, that's straight up theft. So there's no whole, hey, let's just wait and see.
And I suppose maybe for me personally, I would like for whatever responses to be a little bit more forceful in a sense. But then again, it comes back the same way, like me having that thought in terms of what my friend posted is going to come back the same because there are going to be implications, right? One of the things that made me kind of smile, and I was trying to find the country, but so recently the US had placed a ban on a particular country and the country put back a ban on US persons traveling to their country. So, it's almost in like these small ways where if you're trying to say we're going might for might or effort for effort, they're going to do things like that. But can we actually do that?
I think if CARICOM comes together, I'd like to hear what Doc thinks about this. If we come together and we become dependent on each other and try to create a market within CARICOM for certain things, I think we could just
already when we had Tanti Cams trying to pull out the way in which she acting, because when we look at in the case of manufactured products, a lot of them come from either Jamaica or from Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah.
So when we have Tanti acting this way within our own blocking, within our own grouping, then
and that is the problem. Because united we stand and divided we fall. And if we have pieces of our body coming off, it's very hard for us to stand on a point.
Yeah. Doc?
The bodyguards of Maduro took money. They were able to. They were able to. They were able to get a daughter. One of them able to get a daughter medical attention, and a number of other things. It's a matter of the economics. Individual economics were important. People can be bought. In a similar way, there are countries that may be going through their own economic strain. In other words, oil access in Trinidad is being depleted, but they have refining ability. They still have refining ability. And their refinery can also refine the Venezuela oil. They had an agreement with Venezuela. But they're making a calculated risk that even though Venezuela had cut, that will start back up again and be even better with the efforts of the United States. So, the Trinidad support of the United States was strategic for them, but not necessarily for a number of other countries in the region. But you go to all of the backdrop that a year ago and 2 years ago, CARICOM was also at strain in relation to Guyana and the Venezuelan conflict. And they too were in favor of dealing with Guyana, and a lot of efforts were made to get people to talk, and I think that the issue was quelled a little. But in terms of those issues now, I mean, I'm really saying that your allegiances are torn one way or the other, whether it's Guyana versus Venezuela or the United States versus Venezuela. Basically, you would weigh everything up, and you would have to do this in terms of your national interests. It's a principle, yes, there's moral, there's all these kind of issues, being bold and being able to talk, but I think
the fallout from talking, that's the whole thing, is the fallout, because generally the persons who are most vocal are also the most criticized, and in some cases ostracized too, depending. So it is the fallout. And it's one thing for the leaders to say something, but are they actually speaking for the citizens of their country, or are they speaking from, let's say, their ideology or persuasion, etc.? Are they actually speaking on behalf of the citizens? So that's another thing too. When we want for somebody, maybe we want for a leader to come out and say what you did is wrong, but were they actually speaking on the voice of the citizens?
Well, further to that, the way in which you destabilize an economy, there are many ways of doing it. One way is to label. I mean, do you really believe that Maduro was the head of a drug cartel and so forth? And how do you now say a Caribbean leader was involved in drugs? You know what I mean? Or a group of Caribbean leaders were involved in drugs or cocaine, or whatever the case might be. You will find these things actually being said as a form of keeping people quiet. And it's always easy to get somebody to say, yeah, I mean, I spoke to him, this, that, and unfortunately, there's some kangaroo courts, and so that would convict Maduro and so of being guilty.
All right, so I see somebody, Jefferson, I believe the former PM had written to the Russian Prime Minister and was criticized. And and I actually did pull up the letter that he wrote. And okay, so I can't take the point, because in reading just snippets of it, so he said, from our perspective, the special military operation is neither necessary nor desirable. So that is taking a stance in terms of saying that he's not in agreement with it, right? And then there's also another part where he said, as a personal level, as a friend of the Russian Federation, I'm urging you very strongly to cease the special military operation in Ukraine. So yes, he too, in his personal letter, did advocate for there to be peace and for Russia to withdraw. So yes, we have seen it in the past with the former prime minister, the leader of the opposition, in his letter to Russia, where he, coming out of it, you can see that he was taking a stance and he was taking a position.
But it's just the way he went about it. It's not like a blanket statement of, hey, we condemn the U.S. action altogether. He appealed directly to the leader,
right.
So in the case, I guess people maybe expected that in this case, maybe our current Prime Minister, Dr. Friday, should be penning. Maybe he's working on something right now. It goes back to the point that you made earlier this morning. You might want certain things to happen, but it might not happen in the time frame that you think it should. So maybe something is being worked on with the foreign policy between the foreign minister and the prime minister. And in time, we'll see what the final say is.
I suppose I'm just a little bit, maybe to use life's word, annoyed when I read things like we are monitoring. I don't like that word. Right? I don't like it, because to me it's just you know what? We just watching the situation unfold, and then we will decide.
See, another very funny commentary on you used to the word monitoring too last night. It was like, this was the school days when you had the class monitor, and the class monitor took a report back to the head boy.
Yeah, and it's not just that. It's to me, it's more of a situation where, okay, so I see you doing something wrong. I am monitoring the situation. I'm looking at you doing everything wrong, but I'm not stepping in to say, well, you know what? Let's put an end to whatever it is that you're doing wrong. But it's diplomacy, it is foreign affairs, it is the language that is used.
At the end of the day, you want to have relations with these countries in the future, so you don't want to burn any bridges, because while they might disagree on this issue, you need to cooperate on future issues. So you have to be very careful with your language.
I know that there are persons who would say sometimes, like for me, I'm very diplomatic, but you have to be, right? You have to be when it comes to certain things. And if you're a common person, you have to learn how to know how to say things. Imagine when it comes to nations, right? Imagine when it comes to
And not just when it comes to nations, when you're dealing with a nation that has a petty leader who takes everything personally.
yeah, that too.
So you don't
I
want
want to use a word, but Joshua go pull me off, so I gotta leave it there. All righty, so we are going to come to the end of this segment at this time. But remember that coming up at 9:20, we will open the phone lines to hear your thoughts, your voices, your opinions on anything that we discussed here this morning or anything that you want to bring to our attention. All right, so remember that coming up at 9:20, our interactive segment, the Talk to Us segment, will be happening. Time here in SVG, it is 9:05.